Hello and welcome back to the next of my Interregnum videos. Just happy to speak about the process between the pontificate of Pope Francis and that of his successor coming up. I spoke already just kind of the general idea of what these videos are about, the idea of offering a perspective from our faith about what's happening and why. And as well as giving some of my own memories and such from having experienced this process in 2005 or having been witness to it when Pope St. John Paul II passed away and leading up to the election of Pope Benedict XVI. One thing I want to speak about in this video is the funeral itself. The funeral is set for Saturday morning, April the 26th in St. Peter's Square. It's set for 10 o'clock in the morning Rome time, and that's going to be 3 o'clock in the morning in Arkansas. And so again, if you want to get up and watch that, I'm sure you can find a YouTube feed. It's probably on EWTN as well. I haven't actually checked, but I would be almost certain that it's there. I'm sure there are multiple ways there that you can find to watch the funeral. If you do, or even if you just see some pictures or some video clips of it later on, a few things you will notice. Some things that are similar to other funerals, and some that are going to be different. So one of the first things that you might notice is that the cardinal presiding over the funeral mass, as well as the other cardinals concelebrating, bishops, priests, whatever, they will not be wearing white vestments as we are normally accustomed to seeing at funerals in the United States. And they also won't be wearing purple vestments, which is somewhat more common in continental Europe. They also won't be wearing black vestments, which is another option for funerals, and it's one that some might remember from years past as being the main way that you would see funeral vestments. Instead, the celebrant and concelebrants at Pope Francis's funeral mass will be wearing red vestments. Now, we normally associate red with the celebrations of martyrs, apostles, because most of the apostles were martyrs, and things connected to the Holy Spirit. So, for example, Pentecost Sunday wears red. And then martyrs like, say, St. Ignatius of Antioch or St. Isaac Jogues and companions, those always get red. Apostles, as I mentioned, get red. But why red for a funeral, especially a funeral of someone who no one is claiming to be a martyr, right? No one is saying that Pope Francis died out of hatred for the faith. That's the normal way that you classify a martyr, someone who's died because the killer killed him out of hatred for the faith, whether that be like in the early centuries of the church where it's deny the Christian faith or we will kill you, or some of the more recent martyrs like, say, Blessed Stanley Rother, who upheld the principles of the Christian faith to such a strong extent that it put his life in danger. He knew his life was in danger, and he continued to serve his people. And so the church recognizes him as a martyr because he was violently killed in service to the faith and killed by people with hatred for the faith. No one's saying that about Pope Francis. And even if they were, even if somebody died right now as a martyr, or as apparently a martyr, right? Like you see someone that if someone did get killed out of hatred for the faith, at that person's funeral mass, you would not see red vestments because the church first has to declare someone a martyr, which is a longer process. But for the Pope's funeral, you will see red vestments. So why? Well, there can be certain variations within the church from one place to another. I mentioned already that in the United States, Canada, Great Britain, I think you're likely to see white vestments often for funerals. Continental Europe uses purple more often. Both of those are legitimate options. And black is actually still an option for funeral vestments, one that you don't see as much. But those are all options. various different countries can have their own what's called particular law or particular liturgical practice. And in Vatican City, the color for funerals is red, especially for the Pope's funeral. And it's red because of the history of martyrdom. The history of martyrdom in that area. St. Peter was martyred there. Nero, the Emperor Nero and others killed Christians in that area. And so that area specifically has had so many martyrs from the early centuries of the church that red is used for the funeral, again, especially of popes, but I believe also of other funerals in Vatican City. Now, if we have a memorial mass here for the Pope, my understanding is it's actually not appropriate to wear red in that situation, that we would wear white or purple, or possibly even black, but most likely we'd go with white, because that's the funeral color in this location where we are now. And so it's tied, the color there is tied to the location more than to the person. Now we may see more information on that, but this is how things unfolded again in 2005 with John Paul II, is that events within Vatican City were the red vestments. Outside of Vatican City, even within other parts of the city of Rome, would use either white or purple. Besides the vestments, a lot of other things will be similar to other Catholic funerals. You will have I expect a reception of the body at the beginning of the Mass. Although that's possible that won't happen simply because it sort of happened already when his body was transferred from Casa Santa Marta, the Vatican guest house, over to St. Peter's Basilica. So we'll watch to see whether they have that same sort of sprinkling at the beginning. You'll definitely see the incense toward the end. You'll have the same structure of readings that we might have at any other funeral mass. Expect to hear the homilist preach about the resurrection of Jesus and tying that into the life and death of Pope Francis. By the way, the celebrant for the funeral mass will be Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re. Cardinal Re, and that's just spelled R-E. Cardinal Re is the dean of the College of Cardinals. So he's the one who's in charge of the college, or the gathering, the grouping of the College of Cardinals. He's actually 91 years old, and so he will not be voting in the conclave. And we'll have another video later specifically about the conclave and some of those rules, but a cardinal who's over the age of 80 does not vote in the conclave. But as dean, Cardinal Ray still has the responsibility and the privilege of celebrating the Pope's funeral Mass. And I believe he will be preaching at that as well, because Pope Francis did not specify anyone else to be the homilist. Some other differences, though, some differences that the Pope's funeral will have compared to other Catholic funerals. It will be outdoors. We don't do too many outdoor funerals, but his will be in St. Peter's Square. Likely you'll see no funeral pall, and this is one thing that surprised me at the funeral of John Paul II, is where's the pall? Well, as it turns out, the pall is an option. It's an option that's not always used in all countries. It's very much universally used, it seems, here in the United States at Catholic funerals. But that white pall, you might not see it at Pope Francis's funeral, and if you don't, a big part of the reason is apparently it's not used necessarily everywhere. You will likely see a book of the Gospels placed on the casket at some point. And that is a symbol connected to Pope Francis's status as a bishop. When a priest is raised to the episcopacy, when he is ordained a bishop, at one point during the ordination rite, two deacons or folks will hold the book of the Gospels over the bishop's head, and so you see the book of the Gospels there in the funeral for a bishop as well. I remember at St. John Paul II's funeral, the wind had picked up late in the Mass and started turning the pages of the book. They had the book of the Gospels open on the casket, and the pages just started turning, and a lot of people saw in that is that the Holy Spirit sort of stirring up and getting the gospel out or whatever. And you can certainly see certain symbolic things that might have different interpretations. I'm not going to say it's definitely the whole work of the Holy Spirit there. Could well just be a gust of wind, but if, you like to think it's both, I'm certainly not going to refute that because it certainly could be that. As I was thinking this through on this particular point, and again, knowing that having the book of the Gospels on the casket is something you can see at a bishop's funeral, I realized I think I've only personally ever been to the funerals of two different bishops. And one of those was, as I mentioned, John Paul II, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, who died in 2005. The other one was the late Bishop Andrew MacDonald, who was Bishop of Little Rock from about 1973 till 2000, if I'm remembering the dates correctly, and he died, I believe, in 2014. And his funeral was at the Cathedral of St. Andrew in Little Rock, and I do believe I remember seeing that Book of the Gospels on his casket as well. Something you'll see very likely in Pope Francis's funeral that you don't see at a typical funeral is possibly the involvement of some Eastern patriarchs, that is to say the leaders or patriarchs of the Eastern Catholic churches. After communion at John Paul II's funeral, they had a prayer that they led from some of the Eastern Catholic rites, or at least from one of those rites, and it's a reminder to us of the universality of the church in that way. Several heads of state will be present at the Pope's funeral. President Trump has said he will be going along with the First Lady, and so that is one thing that you'll see here. After the funeral is over, or toward the end of it, as they take the Pope's body out, his body will be taken over to the Basilica of St. Mary Major. He will not be buried in St. Peter's Basilica. If you've ever traveled to Rome, you know that if you go into St. Peter's, you go down to this crypt level down below, you've got a bunch of different papal tombs. And up top, you have a few different papal tombs, and those are popes that have been canonized as saints or beatified as blesseds. But popes that have not been canonized, they are in that lower level, that crypt level. But not all popes are buried there. And roughly half, I think, of the popes in the church's history are buried there. Others are at various Roman churches. The last pope to be buried outside of St. Peter's would be Pope Leo XIII, who was buried at St. John Lateran Basilica in 1903. Bit of trivia for you there. And his immediate predecessor, Pius IX, was buried at St. Lawrence outside the walls. And both of those, I think, had some very intentional reasons for that. For Leo, for both of them, it was all about Italy having been unified, and what used to be the Papal States, was this big chunk of central Italy, got taken away, and the Pope's temporal authority was basically gone. And so the Pope, Pius IX, was Pope when that happened. Leo XIII continued on throughout it. And the Pope basically said at that point, I'm a prisoner within the Vatican. I can't go anywhere because this hostile Italian government has taken my territory. So Pius IX, at the end of his life, said, okay, since I wasn't able to leave the Vatican for so long, I want to be buried outside of the Vatican, be buried way out there at St. Lawrence, which is kind of on the outside of the old city walls of Rome, and it's next to a very, very large cemetery in Rome. And so I think Pius IX was saying, I want to be with or near my people of Rome, even as I was not able to be with them at the end of my life. Similarly, Leo XIII gets buried in St. John Lateran. That's actually the basilica the cathedral for the Diocese of Rome. It is a basilica also, but it's the cathedral for the Diocese of Rome. He was never able to officially visit, really, his own cathedral, again, because he was saying, I'm a prisoner within the Vatican, can't go out through Rome because of this political situation with the Kingdom of Italy and the unification that had happened there and everything. The reality is he probably could have traveled. I don't think he would have been arrested, but it was kind of a statement that was being made at that time. There are 7 other popes already buried in the Basilica of St. Mary Major. The most recent was Pope Clement IX, who was buried there in 1669. Pope Francis will be buried at St. Mary Major, right next to the chapel that holds the icon Salus Populi Romani, which translates to salvation of the Roman people or health of the Roman people, depending on how you translate that first word. But Pope Francis would always stop and make a visit there and say a prayer in that chapel before that icon, before and after It's definitely after his trips abroad. So anyway, that's where we are for today. That's some information about the funeral itself. Again, that's Saturday morning, the 26th. Very, very early. I started to say bright and early, but it'd be more correct to say dark and early at 3 o'clock in the morning Central Time if you want to get up and watch that live. Otherwise, again, I imagine you'll be able to find a recording later if you want to see it. So again, thanks for watching. If you're not subscribed already, I would encourage you to do that. Subscribe and click on the notification button so that you can be aware of other videos like this as I make them. And it looks like I've gone slightly over the 15-minute mark today. I apologize for that. Had a lot to say, but we'll try to keep myself under that time limit moving forward. All right. Thanks a lot, and God bless. Bye-bye.